thanks everyone so far for joining. We're just going to give it another minute or two as people kind of filter in. As you can see on my screen here with our slide, be sure once I close out of this slide to select gallery view so that you can see everyone. And we do recommend if you hover over your image, you can see the 3 dots. And if you tap on that, you should be able to rename yourself. So if you want to rename yourself your name and either the school or organization that you're representing, then that just kind of helps with just understand where everyone's at. And then we will kick things off shortly with a 2-word check-in. All right. Sure, we might have a couple other people join in a little bit later, but just to get things started, my name's Sydney Reiners. I'm a customer success coach here at From Now On. So thank you all for being here. Also, huge thank you to Amie for being our moderator this week. I know we've got some really great topics to cover that she will be covering. Some of those just to kind of jump in. So talk about personal branding, finding that balance between selling and serving, and creating content that creates value. So obviously you can see on my screen here, once I close out of the slide, tap on that gallery view so we can see everyone. Obviously not required to share your video, but it does always help further that discussion as we talk about these different topics if we're able to see each other. And obviously, as throughout this happy hour, we heavily encourage jumping in, joining the discussion. This isn't meant for us to just talk at you or webinar at you. We definitely want this to be an open string of conversation and discussion. And now to kick things off with our 2-word check-in for this week is, who is your favorite sports biz follower or influencer? And if you want to add in a why, you can. But to answer that question, just go ahead and drop it into the chat. So if you hover over your screen, you should be able to find the chat button where you can add your answer in there. One last piece before I close out of this slide here is that this meeting is being recorded. So reason for that is just to continue to bring content of value. So creating content that creates value. That's what we want to do here. And so we'll follow up with a recording of this that you can always dive back into along with a blog on these topics. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. So go ahead and bring this into gallery view. Again, encourage turning on your video if you feel comfortable doing that. But otherwise, again, that question for our check-in, who is your favorite sports biz follower / influencer and why? And with that, I will hand it over to Amie to just give a quick intro of herself, and then we'll jump into some of those chat answers if we get some through that channel.
Awesome. Thank you, Sydney. Thank you, Riley. So I think the question is, who is your favorite sports biz follow? Meaning, who do you follow within the business of sports that you believe produces content of value? So I'm going to give you guys a moment. Those of you on the call, I see Rachel, Carlos, Andy, Steven. Wait, we lost Steven. If anyone else wants to post, that would be great. So I'll start with Riley. So Riley has We're Jess Eagle. Riley, why is that person a good social media follow?
Great question. So I don't know her at all on a personal level. I'm just a social follower, but yeah, I followed Jess Smith on Twitter and LinkedIn, and she blogs at Social and Sport, and it seems like she always has a good sort of pulse on kind of the industry, the from everything social and digital and media, and is typically tracking kind of what the latest trends are. And so she's always a great place for kind of a take on maybe something that's trending, and also just to see who's doing great work. She tends to reference peers in the industry that are producing great content or doing innovative things in the digital space.
Awesome. Thank you. I feel like I follow her, and I don't know. I have to look into that. Rachel, the sponsorship space is a good one. You love the Sun's Twitter account. Can you talk about that a little bit? What about the Twitter account is so entertaining?
I mean, I'm not sure if any of you all have looked at it, but I think they got over like 3% or so new followers just while they've been in the bubble. And they tweet at other accounts. They, changed their name of the account, when they were 8-0, they put it to that. It's just sort of, there's so much personality behind it. And I think they keep it updated. They're constantly sending out new things, whether it's just heartbroken emoji or Devin Booker laying out after he had an incredible shot. So it's just, I think they do a really good job, and I've been a fan of them for a while on Twitter.
Awesome. So you make some really good points. They keep it updated. They show personality. You can kind of sense their authenticity. Yeah, so all those things are really important for sure, and being a valuable resource on social. Thank you for your input, Rachel. Sydney says she is a huge fan of the Manchester City Instagram and Twitter.
And
so,
no surprise.
Sydney, can you talk about that? Why?
So I usually, normally, teams kind of, I think it kind of mirrors what Rachel was saying with the Suns account, but they're just very timely and tap into what's going on in cultural, especially pop culture. So when the big Marvel Avengers, all the superhero movies, when the Endgame came out, Manchester City just lashed onto it, and we're just putting out all these super kind of drawing association, kind of branding their stuff, the Marvel superheroes and that sort of stuff, and it's all about the end game. And so just, I don't know, making that pop cultural reference, they do that a lot, and so it's just really fun to share. And I just don't see a lot of, it just seems unique how they kind of latch on to those pop culture references, and it makes it fun.
Yeah, so I feel like you touch on a good point where integrating things from the mainstream media, but also being funny, right? So how important is being funny to being a valuable social media personality, right? That's kind of a key question. So what do you guys think? Is it important to be funny?
I think it really depends on the account, because I follow the Suns because they are funny. But I follow the sponsorship space not because they're funny, but because they are, up to date. I think it just depends on what you're using your platform for. I know here at Virginia Tech, that's not our personality. We're not funny. We're, we have we try to be funny sometimes and it doesn't work. So I think they stick to, our brand. And for the Suns, it's on brand for them to be funny, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah, totally. So that brings up a really great segue. So you, Rachel, just to kind of piggyback on that. So you say you follow the sponsorship space, and I take it that's for your career and your, the importance of your business role rather than your fandom. Right. And so within the sponsorship space, is there a certain person that you follow? Perhaps it's like on LinkedIn as opposed to Twitter, or it could be Twitter, it could be Instagram, but who in the sponsorship space do you think is a good follow?
Well, the sponsorship space is like an account, and Avish Sood,
Oh,
I
okay.
think is how you say it.
Okay.
He is fantastic. I'm a Toronto Raptor fan. He's also a Toronto Raptor fan, so we get along. But he has recently hosted some like networking times, and it's been like just amazing. Some of the people that I've gotten to meet through that, and he's a pretty good resource as well. But the sponsorship space is just an account. Then yeah.
Got it. So that's an actual account. Well, that makes sense. All right. So of the other people on the call, Carlos or Dan, did you guys want to chime in at all with your sort of preferred social media follows? I'll give you guys a minute.
I don't have any specific that I follow. I follow many. And anything that I can see that's innovative or brings timely information forward that could be maybe applied in some unique way to what we do, then that's what I like to emulate or share that information with other people.
Got it. So Dan, where are you calling in from?
Thousand Oaks, California.
Okay. Are you in the sports business? Are you in the...
Yeah, I'm an athletic director at a university.
Okay, got it. Cool. All right. So within the athletic director space, is there anyone specific that you follow, just out of curiosity?
You know, the role is broad. So this is one aspect, right? So our sports information folks and our younger coaches especially, they follow a lot of things, and then they share those ideas. I don't have any specific one that's my favorite, but I love to see the innovation that's going on and the different angles that can be used to bring forward ideas. And I think the fast moving pace of all of it is part of the fun, right?
Yeah,
it's
totally.
Like part of the fun.
Great. Thank you for chiming in. Carly, so if you have anything to add, you can jump in now.
No, what Dan said sounded way cooler than what I was going to say. So.
I would kind of punt it back to the whole group. I just want to touch on the podcast space for a second. And I'm curious to see if anyone on the call has a favorite podcast, whether it's within the sports biz or outside the sports biz, that they find to be valuable in some way. You can put it in chat or you can speak.
I have a lot of podcasts that I listen to. I actually love podcasts. I have a couple that I listen to weekly. The first one is Flip the Switch, and that's by Engagement. And David Millay works there, and he's just fantastic. They do a lot of sponsorship things, but also just they are all former Disney execs, and so they bring really the Disney culture and fan experience from Disney into the sports world, which is really cool. And then I listen to the Inches podcast, and Nick, we work with him here at Tech. He does that one. And then Women Blazers is a really good one. It's all about Diana Whittier, something like that. She does that one. And it's just women in the sports world, how they're taking on things, how they're dealing with things. I can stop there.
Thank you. 3 really good contributions. I know the folks over at FNO are big on the Disney way, right? So do you guys listen to the Flip the Switch?
I haven't. I'm familiar with Engagement. I haven't listened to their podcast yet, but I just wrote it down actually to go add it to my long list of podcasts that I know Sydney and Amie
that you listen to while you're sleeping, right, Riley?
Yeah, I don't know where I find time, especially in the midst of a pandemic. So all my commute time is gone.
I know.
You know, I have like a balance of podcasts that are some that are like work related that I really like the Sports Geek. I really like Sean and what he does there. It's always very sports tech and like kind of sports biz focused, up and coming companies, or just, or teams that are doing interesting things. And he's based out of Australia, so you kind of get the global vibe, the international vibe, which I always think is interesting, especially since we work so much in the United States and in college sports specifically. It's always interesting to kind of get out of those markets and see what people are doing in sports tech and sports around the globe. And it's funny, there's a lot of things that are the same, and then, some things that are just, a little different, depending on the part of the world you're in.
Definitely. Yes. And so I guess my next question on top of the podcast question is, and it's sort of a global question for any content creator, any sort of social media personality, any podcast host, any creator, like, what is it that makes that valuable, right? And what is it that makes a content creator a great content creator, as opposed to like, just okay, might not listen to this again, might not follow this person. You know what I'm saying? Any thoughts on that?
For me, like, especially when it comes to podcasts or something like that, I always like things to be kind of more organized. So I have an expectation of what it's going to be like each time. So versus just like a general flow of conversation, but that there is kind of a cadence that they take where, we start out, we're just chatting about, oh, what's new with you? And then we go into what's the news of the day. And then, questions at the end, or just something where there's a format. That's the word I'm looking for.
Format.
That's
Yep.
usually kind of a big thing for me as far as like continuing on with it, because I then know versus, if one's completely different than another one, sometimes I'm like, yeah, but is it going to be as good as that one? And then it's just, they either make it or break it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like the predictable segments. I always like podcasts that kind of break up, especially if they're longer ones. Like if they're longer than a half hour, it's nice that if they have like, different like segments, even if it's maybe they're interviewing the same person the whole time, but it's like during this segment, we're going to talk about your background, but then here we're going to get your takes on specific things. Like just breaking it up in that way allows me to sort of pick and choose a little bit of like, well, I don't want to listen to this part, or this, this segment this week. So I'm going to fast forward and get through that. Kind of gives me more control over the episode.
Yeah. And how do you guys feel about frequency? Like how often is enough for a podcast versus how like what's the like expected sort of consistency and cadence that you find to be manageable?
I get really annoyed when like my favorite podcasts don't, like, if they publish like off schedule.
Right.
Like, they always publish on Mondays and then they decide to publish on like a Wednesday or Tuesday. Like, God forbid they take a vacation or something.
Yeah.
I'm like,
No.
come on, like my
You're
whole,
like, that's
whole week's
not
organized
okay.
around
Yeah.
the podcast schedule. So weekly is the kind of the schedule I prefer, because if it goes too far beyond that, I don't have enough of a hook to keep me coming back.
Totally.
I also think it depends on how long the podcast is. Like there's a podcast I listen to that it's almost like 2 hours long sometimes. So like that one, it's almost like I'm excited when I see a new one, like even if it's been a month, because I'm just like, yes, like I'm going to like plug this in and like go for a while. But if they were like shooting those out like every week, I would be almost like overwhelmed because it's so long. But something like Up First from NPR where they're 15 minutes. Like if they skipped a day, I'd be like, wait, what?
Yeah, right. So it depends on like the material, depends on the length, that makes a lot of sense. All right. So moving along. So what we wanted to do with this happy hour was sort of focus on the idea of like just to drill into the thinking a little bit about, what makes someone an effective content creator, regardless of format, and what are the things that are the difference makers. So we talked a little bit about humor, integrating things from mainstream media and pop culture, being consistent, messaging, personality, all that stuff. But I wanted to flip a little bit the conversation toward the idea of building a personal brand online. So we see all of these creators out there, people that have gone and taken the big leap into content creator status. And how does a person who isn't officially a content creator, you know, what we would call a consumer of content versus a creator of content, make the leap into content creator status? You know, so I wanted to just put that out there and see what people think about how do you start that process? You know, where do you begin?
I think for me, you really have to understand what the brand is. And I think brand is sort of a loose word. I think you can take it a lot of ways, but like understanding, just kind of knowing who your audience is, what you're putting out there. I mean, again, I think back to why we listen to different things. You know, you listen to it for a certain reason. So what is your reason? Why are you, you know, because if you're just kind of all over the place, then why would people keep coming back if they're, you know, if one day you're talking about sports, the next day you're talking about something else and there's no purpose behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you, Rachel. You said something I found interesting, because it's like you kind of have to know who you are, like know your brand. Like I find, just as like a marketer, like knowing your audience is like something we all inherently know. We know we have to know it, but it's sort of easier said than done sometimes, of like truly knowing what that audience is and what they care about, because I feel like it can be really fragmented at times. So like I'm sure at Virginia Tech, I mean, the fan base for Virginia Tech is huge. How do you go about kind of knowing your audience, or speaking to different parts of that audience, if they, you know, the different segments of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. For us, we do use a lot of analytics. So we have obviously the Facebook and Twitter and all of those, but we also have a lot of demographic information on our fan base specifically. We have, through Learfield, we have this program called Fan Base, and they basically collect all this information from all of our fans, and we can have brand affinities on there. We can have demographics. We have all kinds of things. And so, you know, we use that a little bit, but I think seeing what content does well on which platforms has really helped us. And because some content, you know, does really well only on Instagram, and the people that are on Instagram are consuming that content, and that's what they want. And that content doesn't necessarily work for our people that are on Facebook. And so it's kind of loose, and like some of the ways we know exactly these fans are on these platforms. We're going to target that exact audience. And sometimes we're going to target more of the platform audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I answered your question fully, but.
No, that's super helpful. So it's funny, like the trial and error method never gets old. So like, do you do a lot of testing of different content or on different platforms? Like, do you feel like you guys have a lot of like room for experimentation with that, or you know, how much do you look to like the past seasons or past years for, I guess, new ideas?
Normally we would look at the past year and definitely see how, you know, we do kind of a recap after every season, mainly just football and basketball with our social and digital content team. And we just look at what our company sends us, what is it called? There's a company that they use, and it pulls like, these are the top performing posts of all of your pages. These are the lowest performing posts of all your pages. It'll come to me in a minute, but we look at those and we say, well, why didn't these work? For example, last year football season, we had these GIFs that we used on Facebook, and they did not perform ever well. They were awful. And so the plan was not to use GIFs on Facebook anymore going forward. Of course, this year, I feel like, you know, it's completely crazy. And so we definitely are doing a little more experimenting this year than we maybe normally do, just because you kind of have to. A lot more things are moving digital and social versus staying on those where they would have gotten the content in person. But I think we are still trying to stick with, okay, if you used to get your game day timeline on Instagram, you're going to still get your game day timeline on Instagram. We don't want to, throw it up in the water and just try all new things. We definitely still want to make sure we're providing the right content on the right platform that our fans are used to seeing.
Yeah, you make some really, really smart points, Rachel. So you started by really talking about audience, and that's so important. It's like content is really audience first. Like, who is the audience? What do they need and want is like, number one. And then, backing into that, right? So a lot of times I feel as though brands are making content more for themselves than they are for the audience, because they're being very much like, look at me, look what we did. But what they're not doing is really actually serving their audience and giving them what they need and want. So I think you definitely have your kind of finger on the pulse there, especially, you talked about all the analytics and stuff that you guys study to really optimize. And I like the point that you made about, being platform sort of centric, like, not everything works for every platform, and that's 100% true. And so how do you optimize on a platform by platform basis? I think this is like something that brands struggle with across, all industries, because there are so many different distribution points that have so many different tones, like to your point about Facebook doesn't like the GIFs and they work elsewhere, so it's definitely something that is all about the test and tweak. I like to say test and tweak instead of trial and error.
That sounds better.
Sounds like less, like more intentional. Anyway, all those are great points. What I like to start with, in addition to really trying to understand my audience, is what my goals are. What am I actually trying to achieve, right? And so, like, if you're a brand, if you're a Virginia Tech, if you're, a professional sports team, what are their goals actually, right? And then backing into those goals to produce content to achieve them. A person, anyone can become a content creator. So lately, I think we're seeing a lot of upheaval around the sports business, and we've seen a little bit of a movement toward some new thought leaders and content creators that are sort of coming out of the woodwork as things have gotten either quieter in their daily lives, or perhaps things have gotten like, radio silent with like furloughs and layoffs. And so I think becoming, a thoughtful creator is like a great avenue toward building a personal brand right now. And so for some people, a goal might be visibility, right? For that next opportunity when the university, or, when the universities and the teams and everything sort of comes back up to the normal pace, like God willing, whenever that will be. But, starting with the goal of bringing some visibility to yourself, as a professional in the industry. What does the group think about content creation for personal visibility? Any thoughts? Dan, Carlos, or Chris? Chris, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Sorry,
hello.
I was over with Georgia Tech, so my bad. It's nice to meet you.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Likewise. What's going on, Ray?
Hey, Chris.
How are you?
Good.
I think, Amie, I apologize that I got in late, so I might be completely missing the mark here. But now that I feel safe with this nice, intimate group, no, you know what I think is really interesting is specifically in this climate is the ability to personally brand with all the furloughs in this business. Is, how are you essentially kind of, I spoke to one of our partners at the New Orleans Saints the other day. They have a partnership marketing position open. And she said, yeah, we got a lot of applicants. And of course you did, because Learfield just unloaded 100 of them.
Right.
So, you know, I was thinking about that the other day, and you see every now and then people are posting on LinkedIn, you know, hey, my time with so-and-so has ended, you know, looking for the next step. And it's, how do you break through the clutter? Because there are a lot of people in this industry looking for a job right now, and not a lot of them to be had probably for the next 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, excellent point. You know, you came to the party late, but you're listening and you're right on target. So thank you. Yes. So I think my response to that, I have so many thoughts that swirl through my mind because I'm paying attention to this on a day-to-day basis. What I like is that certain people are owning the furlough. They're owning the layoff. They're coming out and they're posting it immediately to LinkedIn and to social media. And they're saying, here's what's going on in my life. And they're then alerting their network of this change, which is a million times better than not doing that, right? Because then if you don't do that, then no one knows that you're in need of a new position, and you're sort of like then digging yourself down into a hole of solitude. Sounds really sad, but it's true, right? So the first things first is like owning the furlough, but then how do you continue to have visibility? Because, you know, we don't know when the industry will pick back up. We don't know when, you know, a job opportunity is going to hit. We know, like, to your point, thousands of applications are coming in. You know, I talked to front office sports who is in a great position and growing and hiring. Tons of applications are coming in, right? So how do they then go through this candidate pool? And I think in today's world, you do go to the social channels. You go to look, does this person have any type of a following, especially in something like, you know, a creator, an editorial role within, you know, a front office sports, or even not an editorial role within any kind of brand. The people that you hire, if they bring a brand, if they bring a following, that's only going to be more valuable to you. So I think, you know, where do you begin? It's sort of starting with your goal. Is your goal to get a new job in the business of sports, right? Then you have to think about, who do you want to get in front of, right? Who is your content for? So it goes back to Rachel's point. So who are we producing content for? The same rules apply to an individual. If I'm trying to get a job at Virginia Tech or at a college across the United States, I'm going to create content for the athletic directors. I'm going to create content for the marketers within the collegiate space, right? It's then maybe you're commenting on timely issues. Maybe you're being funny, you know, maybe you're being lighthearted about your furlough. But the bottom line is that you're visible and that you have some semblance of a strategy, right? Would you guys agree?
I think
Yeah.
also, go ahead,
Yeah.
Sydney.
I was gonna say, Dan dropped a really great comment in the chat here. I don't know, Dan, if you want to expand upon that, just being a resource.
Well, I think what happens, a lot of folks who are very talented in sports areas, all of you, many coaches, and all the different fields associated, whether it's trainers or otherwise, strength coaches, performance coaches, they are a resource. And many families, many individuals who are looking at going to college or thinking about it when this all ends or how it's going to end, they need a sounding board to ask questions and understand more what do we do right now? What can we do now for our own visibility, meaning an athlete trying to get into college, or youth sports kids who aren't able to go out and practice because the fields are closed, or whatever else it is. You know, what things can we do, coach, in college? What can we do? That college coach can be a content provider and give guidance to some of those families on ideas. You know, the club coaches do it with Zooms and everything else like this, but it's more than that. I think there's a whole mental aspect and that whole aspect of we've lost something. You know, we're lost something, we're missing something. This has been part of our identity our whole lives, and now all of a sudden it's all gone. What do we do?
Right.
Parents, how do we keep our kids motivated? How do we keep them interested? How do we keep them active? Even if it's not specifically in their sport, but to keep them healthy and keep them mentally and physically healthy. And, you know, what are some things we can do? And I think that may be an important resource for a lot of folks today in all the fields, in every field, especially for those who've been in the field already and have some professional experience and background. Being able to share that, you know, sharing that social capital, I'll call it that, with others to help lift them up, I think is a critical aspect right now in this time. And I think it's part of our opportunity as a community to do that.
Yeah, I love all of that. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, so you're getting ahead here, and it's perfect because what you're doing is you're showcasing what your superpower is, right? So whatever it is that you bring to the table, what you've spent your career doing is what you can bring to the table now and provide a value to the people that need it. I really like how you said, you know, share the social capital with others to help lift them up in this time. Yes. So what you're doing then is you're providing a service. Okay. So that lends itself really well to the final section in my notes that I wanted to touch on today is mastering the sell-serve balance. When you're a content creator, first things first, knowing your audience. Second thing is how can you serve them, right? So you're touching on some really great points, and the families and the people that are out there like wondering like, well, what can we do now, you know, during this challenging time? Well, perhaps you can present, you know, your opinion consistently on the proper social channel and build a bit of a following by being a resource to those people. And inherently what you're doing then is you're really selling your expertise, right? And so it's being a very generous creator and providing a service to a unique niche, a unique audience of people, and inherently then building your personal brand in doing so, which is, you know, helping you in the long term for whatever is the next thing that you will do professionally or personally. So I think you touch on some great points there. Anybody else, any thinking along the lines of how during this particular moment in time you can provide a service through content to your following?
I think you see some brands doing it now of like being the escape, where it's not necessarily anything about what's going on or, I don't know, maybe being the resource, but just literally having exciting, interesting, I mean, that's again, back to the Suns. That's something I just love about them is it's like there's just an NBA season happening and they're just tweeting away and they're happy or they're sad or whatever it is, but it's not about like what's going on right now. Mm-hmm. It's just sort of entertainment.
Mm-hmm. Which is a major value in service. Like I was talking with Riley, I don't know, a week ago. We're like, let's make people laugh. That's a service, people. People need to laugh. So, you know, we're providing value. It doesn't always have to be like some direct answer to some, you know, hard question. But, you know, there are many, many ways to be a valuable creator, you know, right now. Any other thoughts from the group on the sell-serve balance or how to be a compelling content creator?
Amie, I thought your point, you know, the thing that jumped in my mind when you were talking about, you know, bringing your brand to any team that you bring, two things came to mind. Number one was, you know, when my friends and I were all getting LinkedIns, you know, at the end of college, and when you go to someone's page, it used to say, you know, connections and say 500 plus. And we're like, man, if you don't have that 500 plus, if you're not over 500, you're a scrub. Like, you gotta go. If you're not like 5+, get out of here. And that just kind of hit me, was like, you know, that really is something that from a quantifiable standpoint probably does provide a ton of value. And then, you know, I think the other piece is just being more than a brand. It, you know, for so many people that may be, you know, looking for jobs over the next 9 months and wanting to join a new team, doesn't it raise the ceiling of what you need to bring to an interview? Mm-hmm. Of, you know, I mean, it really shows, okay, like you can't go in and say, here's my resume, this is what I do. I mean, you really have to come in saying, this is my plan, this is the kind of specs I put together. And it really, I mean, you talk about people that go the extra mile. I mean, the call and now almost the necessity to do so, is something that I think the people that do are going to, and the people that don't are going to get left behind. And it's going to be a tough, probably year of, I don't want to say, lack of drive, but to a certain extent, you're going to take it as an anchor if you don't show that level of ambition and proactiveness.
Yeah, I think this is a really valid point and interesting conversation. Like, particularly if you're a marketing person and you're going for a job in marketing, and people are coming in with blogs, and people are coming in with social media followings and brands and personalities that they've built for themselves, like over the years or even over quarantine. That's certainly going to separate them and make it harder for other people coming in that maybe haven't marketed themselves and showcased that skill. So I totally understand what you're saying. And yeah, I think maybe that does make it a bit more stressful. But I think like what happens here is the cream rises to the top. I've been kind of beating the drum like over quarantine is staying active, staying high value. I know Sue, the CEO from now on, is always talking, how do we stay high value? How do we remain visible? And I think it's so important to just begin, just to start. You don't have to have a fully fleshed out plan for what you want to do or what you want to achieve or what your brand will be. I think sometimes that evolves, to Rachel's point, like, you may have, not really know where you're headed until you're a year into creating, and you start to look back and say, what were the most compelling pieces of content that I created this past year? And let me then focus on that, as an avenue for me, because people really sort of responded to that. So right now, I think that the exercise is to begin becoming visible, to begin to start to build a cadence, whether you're representing a business or your own personal brand. Because yeah, you're right. I mean, the interview pools are going to be very deep. And how do you show up on top? That's going to be challenging.
I think also, so personally for me, I am probably going to be looking for my next step soon. So, I went through, redid my resume and definitely sparked it up a little bit versus a plain resume. But I'm definitely not one that has a social presence, I would say, I guess. I mean, if you follow me on Twitter, it's basically all just Toronto Raptors, and it's probably boring. But I think that I do a good job on the relationship side, and especially during this quarantine, doing webinars, listening to podcasts, connecting with people, kind of made it a goal. Every single week I connect with a new person. And so for me, it's less important about having my personal brand out there on social media, but more of for people to actually know me, get to know me, and for me to get to know them. And I think in the sports world, it's really important to have those relationships. I'm sure there's some positions that having a high social media following is helpful and beneficial, but I think there's a lot that just, if you know your stuff and you have those connections and you build your relationships, I think it can take you a long way.
I agree with you. I think that's a really great point. I mean, your reputation, I think, is kind of what you're referring to, right? So if you are, showing consistent excellence and you're a networker and you're driven and people, will vouch for you. And that's huge. I mean, that's huge in this business because ultimately it's a small business. The business of sports is small and people know each other and everyone's just kind of like one or two sort of layers away. So I think developing a really solid reputation is very, very, very important right now. Yeah. So that really wraps up all the, the things that I wanted to touch on. I really had a nice time kind of chatting with you guys. Thank you so much for the input. Everyone who, decided to chime in. I think everyone said something, which is awesome. But again, nice spending some time with you guys, talking content, strategy, branding, and what we're all going to do going forward. So, Riley, I don't know how you wrap these up, but
I let Sydney do it.
okay.
Just lets me do everything for him. That's how this all works out. But thank you all again. Huge thank you to Amie. We'll get our cheers in here just in a moment. But, you know, I know this is our last happy hour for this series, but definitely make sure to give us a follow on social media if you want to hear about any of our upcoming dates or any announcements that we have just coming out about, you know, our platform and what we've got exciting out there. But again, thank you, Amie. Thank you all for joining. I think we had a really great, tight-knit group here that really made for a lot of really great discussion and, you know, everyone playing a part. As Amie said, I'm like falling over my words right now. I swear this is coffee. I was not actually. But throw it up for the cheers. My virtual background is
Water.
out. Water.
Cheers.
Anyone have a beverage?
Cheers. Cheers.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks,
See
Jill.
ya.
Great job. Bye-bye.
Bye.